GATE funding. So in clearing up some of the misconceptions, I want to indicate to you that the GATE policies established in 2006, well, starting in 2004, 2006, modified in 2008, have not changed in 2012-2013. Students will be allowed GATE funding for the pre-med year 3 and the medical program at the St. George's University, Grenada for the 2012-2013 academic program. However, in September 2013, GATE funding for the pre-med year 3 at St. George's University, Grenada will be terminated. As you may or may not be aware, this program is not a terminal program. That is to say, a student will complete this program and acquire no qualifications for it. So it really is what is called a bridging program. And this category of programs are not funded in Trinidad and Tobago. There are similar programs at UTT and COSTAT. All programs of study that are currently GATE approved at regional institutions will continue to receive funding under the GATE program. Third, means testing will not be used to determine the eligibility of GATE funding. And I stress, GATE means testing will not be used as a mechanism to determine an applicant's eligibility for GATE funding. There appears to be some misrepresentation. What is the intention is to implement the use of the grade point average as a mechanism to control abuse of the funding mechanism. However, this is not a new criteria. Students have been required to meet the minimum performance standards of their institution since 2006. However, this policy has not been adhered to for the most part by the public institutions. In 2011, the public institutions were advised that effective January 2012, students who did not meet the minimum GPA of their institutions will not be eligible for continued GATE funding. In addition, the Higher Education Loan Program, HELP, will continue to function as a support to the GATE program. HELP will be administered by the Funding and Grants Division of the Ministry of Tertiary Education and Skills Training. For the private tertiary institutions, GATE clearance policy came in 2008. It is recommended that in 2013 that this GATE clearance policy will apply both to public and private tertiary learning institutions. I'm skipping now to my conclusion. As the interim chairman of the Standing Committee on GATE, recommendations were made to the Cabinet. And I will indicate 3 of those recommendations. As the government seeks to build a solid platform for the development of a diversified, knowledge-driven economy, the Standing Committee on the GATE program recommended that GATE funding must be aligned to the following: economic priority areas, current and future skills needs, and national diversity and social integration. If you look at the 2012-2013 budget under Section 4, Developing Human Capital, under the section Higher Education, it reads, the program, referring to the GATE program, the program will refocus on the areas of priority study necessary to support our strategy for economic and industrial development. 2, tuition fees for undergraduate programs at both private and public institutions will be funded at varying rates based on their socio-economic priorities. And so where the jobs, where the areas of study that will ensure young people are qualified for those jobs. If we have an abundance of young people graduating in areas where there are no jobs, what does it say for the economic development of our country? 2, further to existing policies, the Standing Committee on the GATE program has recommended that the following policies be implemented by September 2013. and I mentioned this before, the gate clearance policy to be applicable to all public and private tertiary institutions. This ensures that there is equity in the system and the policy applies to students both in the public and private sectors. A policy of no repeats to be implemented for all gate-approved programs at all approved tertiary educational institutions. This introduction of no repeats will serve to prod students to do their best and ensure that the public purse does not fund non-performance. And under that same section in the budget, item 3, and quoting from the 2012-2013 budget, the gate clearance policy program will apply to all public and private tertiary educational programs. More comprehensive methods on the determination of tuition fees at public and private tertiary educational institutions will be instituted. We will ensure that students who receive gate funding meet normal academic standards and serve their contractual obligations. And so it is this last section that we need your input and the input of all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. There is a worked out formula where if your gate funding falls within a certain category, for example, if it's up to 50,000, there's a period of service of 1 year. If it's up over 200,000, it's 5 years. How do we get our young citizens who have received gate funding to come back and to work within the private or the public sector? And that's one of the things that we are discussing right now, and we need your suggestions on. So I want to say to all of you, especially those who are in the tertiary sector, have no fear about gate funding continuing. Because if you are to have economic development and diversity, the human capital must be developed. We must have a better educated workforce. But however, we must be very smart in how we allocate that funding. That funding must be aligned to all of those areas that we spoke about in terms of the resources and the ambitions of Trinidad and Tobago. So I want to say in conclusion that for all of us, whether we are primary, secondary, or tertiary, we must ensure that taxpayers' dollars are not wasted. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dowlath, for being brief and instructive. It's now my pleasure to invite the chairman of the board to come and address us, and I'm referring here to Mr. Curtis Manchoon, chairman of the Board of Governors of the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Manchoon holds an MBA from Warwick Business School, University of Warwick, and is a fellow of the Association of Certified Accountants and a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Trinidad and Tobago. He is the former Deputy Chairman and CEO of the National Broadcasting Network and Deputy Chairman of National Quarries Limited. Mr. Manchoon also served as a member of the board of the directors of the Caribbean Broadcasting Union and the Caribbean Media Corporation. He is a founding member, director of the Tobago Emergency Network team, and has served in various leadership capacities at his local church. I invite Dr. Manchoon to address the group. Curtis.
Thank you, Professor Ryan, especially for the award of the doctorate.
Not a UTT doctorate.
Good morning. Thankfully, I'm the last speaker, and I will, like my colleague, Dr. Dowlath, try to be as brief as possible. Let me thank all of the presenters for a very engaging morning, and for you, the audience, for being here with us as well. and I trust you found it as interesting as I did, even in my capacity as chair of UTT. My topic here is entrepreneurship and student development, and I think from the beginning with Mr. Bahaw's presentation to Dr. Dowlath's conclusion, if you wish, on GATE, we can probably see the need for entrepreneurship, because the picture that was painted by our very first presenter, of course, was one of declining national revenues. And of course, based on declining revenues from the base of our economy, the oil and gas sector. Some time ago, columnist Michael Harris, writing in his column, I thought it was a very interesting article in one small column, analyze how our economy works. And I think this is very useful for our students. Glad to see all of you sitting down, because you are the future of our country, the future leaders, of course, but for everyone here. And actually, I thought when Rohani asked her question, Dr. Maraj, and someone else asked the question to put up your hands, I thought about asking that question as well. If we were to ask the question, how many of you, as part of your life goal, your career goal, have as an aspiration to be an entrepreneur and to own your own business, as opposed to applying for a job to work for somebody else? I see one young man, yes, you're putting up your head. A couple of hands are going up, and that is very commendable. I was a little bit scared to ask you to put up your hands, whether like agriculture, we'd have very few hands. But that is very, very commendable. But I just want to come back to what Mike Harris said in that column, and which links back to Mr. Bahaw's presentation. Is that when we looked at those charts, Jen, we look at the price of oil and gas. Of course, production is in our hands, and that in itself is declining, which is contributing to the fall in revenues. But the setting of the prices are determined internationally by global forces. We don't have control of that. And if we look at our sector, some of the big players like BP and BHP Billiton and a number of the others, they don't belong to us. And they make their strict business decisions, not in the interest of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, but based on their corporate financial goals and so on. And so therefore, the base of our economy, the thing that drives our economy, is really outside of our hands as Trinidadians and Tobagonians. We are subject to the vagaries of the international prices on the global market by forces that are outside of our control. And so that, the decline in revenues, you young people are looking forward, you are studying, and we don't mean to be depressing or to be negative or anything, but we have to be realistic when we look at the world that you will be entering, the world of work, and where we are going in the future. And so our economy is, to a large extent, dependent on forces that are outside of our control. We celebrated 50 years of independence, but economically we are very much dependent, or perhaps interdependent, with the global forces that are taking place outside there. Now, behind me on the wall here, we have a copy of UTT's mission statement, and I just want to read that out, because an entrepreneurial university is a different creature from the traditional universities, and it reads, to be an entrepreneurial university designed to discover and to develop entrepreneurs, and we've just discovered a couple budding entrepreneurs here. To commercialize research and development, spawn companies for wealth generation and sustainable job creation towards the equitable enhancement of the quality of life for all individuals, families, communities of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. And so we are talking about a university which is dedicated to that. And I believe Dr. Williams used the word UTT boasts of being an entrepreneurial university. I don't think we've gotten to the stage yet of boasting so much. Dr. Williams, it's our mission and our core purpose, and we are working to really making that happen. As a matter of fact, our Navin Buddha, our Vice President, Business Development, who opened this morning, that falls within his ambit to really operationalize that mission to make that happen. Trinidad and Tobago, perhaps, or I should say, let me rephrase that a little bit. This morning before I came here, I had a call from CNC3 just to find out what we were doing here this morning. And one of the questions put to me was the question of the enabling environment. And I responded to the interviewer by saying that while that is true, while we need to put in place that enabling environment, I think part of the entrepreneurial journey, like the caterpillar and the butterfly, is that entrepreneurs need to learn how to overcome challenges and obstacles and difficulties. As a matter of fact, entrepreneurs seize upon problems, and in each one of the presentations here this morning from Professor Sweet's construction, and Dr. Miraj's food and agriculture, the creative industries and so on, in each one of those sectors, there are problems and there are challenges to be overcome. And we tend to take the approach that somebody else has to solve those problems. We talk about the government implementing and the government doing this. And while none of us doubt that they have an important leadership role to play, the truth of the matter is that institutions and organizations like ourselves, Dr. Dowlath and Gate, and us at the university and UWI and all of the fellow tertiary institutions, we are in fact the implementing agencies. We've been allocated a budget and we have staff, and we are the ones to take on board those problems that face our society. And we have to ask ourselves the question, how do we change those graphs that Mr. Bahor put up there in terms of growing the economy? It really is the responsibility of all of us, and that's part of the entrepreneurial mindset. Not just talking about it and expecting somebody else to solve it, but how can we get involved in that whole process? So while we acknowledge that there is a lot more that government itself can do to establish the policy framework for engendering entrepreneurship as a core economic development strategy, the role that we play as institutions within the education and training sectors in building capacity, capability, and culture is important. Therefore, as institutions, we must continue to question ourselves. Are we putting out the type of graduate required from an economic development perspective? Can we continue to graduate students to produce graduates who expect to find a job? And you hear people complaining about that, but I have a degree and I can't find a job. As though it's something to go looking for and you find it. And maybe there was a point in the world's history when economic conditions existed so that you could easily go find a job. This is not a Trinidad and Tobago problem. This is a global problem. The head of the Gallup organization talks about surveying the 7 billion people and trying to find out what is the one thing on planet Earth that these 7 billion people want. And the Gallup is a very respected polling organization. And his conclusion is that the one thing that the 7 billion people on planet Earth want is a good job. Is a good job. And he argues in that publication, The Coming Jobs War, that if there's one issue that leaders should devote themselves to, is how do we create these jobs for all of these people? So this is not just a Trinidad and Tobago problem. This is a global phenomena that is taking place. And therefore entrepreneurship, trying to create your own opportunities and to create your own means of sustaining yourself is part of a mindset of not depending on the government or some large enterprise or smaller enterprise, but looking around at the problems that confront us in our communities, in our societies, and asking ourselves, can I produce a solution for that? A solution that would be economically viable. And as someone mentioned before, it begins, and in fact, the chairman of the Gallup organization talks about the entrepreneurial mindset beginning from the elementary school level, coming through the secondary school level, right up through tertiary. So it's not something you suddenly decide when you graduate. A decision can be made there. But if we would begin in our education system to begin to talk, and Dr. Joseph and the folks at the education school who are training teachers, and he made that point. One of the ways to transform the system is to start with the teachers. So that as teachers teach students, you come up with that kind of change mindset that a viable opportunity and option is for me to consider creating something, some piece of instrument. Only last week was the first anniversary of Bill Gates' passing from this world. And he has made a global impact, one person. Not Bill Gates, sorry, Steve Jobs. My apologies. Steve Jobs. Bill Gates is still here with us. But has made an impact on the whole world. Second question to think about, are we responding to a world where industries are being fundamentally restructured? And that's a good example. Steve Jobs changed the way music is produced and music is purchased and music stored and so on. I come from a generation like Dr. Ryan when we used to buy 45s and LPs and so on with one song and 10 songs and that kind of thing on old vinyl records, which you don't know about. And today we buy something the size of this which could hold, I don't know, 3,000, 8,000 songs. So many different songs. Completely change that business, the creativity. And that's the kind of thing that we need to unleash among our young people and get them thinking like that as they grow up. Where Fortune 500 companies are faced with competition from entrepreneurs just a mere decade or two old, such Fortune 500 companies have also disappeared completely because of competition and the inability to respond to changes in the business environment. While we today continue to speak about our traditional economic and resource-based sectors such as construction, maritime, manufacturing, and all that we spoke about earlier on, inherent in each of these are significant potential for growth and the development when we take it from an entrepreneurial and technology-driven perspective. Dr. Maraj spoke about opportunities in agriculture to revamp what they do at ECIAF. As a national university, the University of Trinidad and Tobago has as its mission to be an entrepreneurial institution. In fact, all our tertiary level institutions should be thinking that way. That is to graduate young minds with an ability to seek out new opportunities and to respond rapidly to the needs of our environment, take risks, and see failure as part of the journey to becoming successful. As an institution, we possess the environment to nurture and develop such a graduate. We have a community comprising persons of varying talents and 360 degrees of support that must seek to encourage and assist in engendering creativity and incubating ideas. Danny Jagannath, who spoke on the creative industry, of course, doesn't belong to UTT in that sense, but the John Donaldson campus was recently rebranded as the Creativity Campus on Wrightson Road, as it houses our animation and our fashion design and those kinds of businesses, ICT and so on. And UTT is attempting to brand each of its campuses all around the country with a particular focus. So Professor Sweets, what used to be the San Fernando Technical Institute is being rebranded the Manufacturing Campus, where we will develop programs that will be devoted to that particular industry sector. So I think this morning you've gotten a good overview of some of the range of programs that UTT is involved in. And just to wrap it up with this focus on being the entrepreneurial university with a goal of really developing that entrepreneurial mindset. And entrepreneurship does not only mean going out and starting your own business. Of course, that's one of the big aspects of it. But you could be an intrapreneur, working within an organization, and that's important because existing organizations need people who work within the organization to think with an entrepreneurial mindset of seeing problems as opportunities to create solutions. And of course, if we could commercialize those solutions, that's where you get the Bill Gates and you get the Steve Jobs and you get the Michael Dells and you get the Fred Smiths and so on, becoming masters of your own destiny and creating businesses which can employ other people and which thereby could help to drive the economic development. So I don't want to keep you back much longer. I know it's late, but just to go back there. So if our oil revenues are declining and if they are outside of our control and if we are seeking to diversify our economy, we really want to challenge all our students, the young ones coming up, to begin to think about, as you go through your classes and as you study your lessons and you enter into tertiary education, to think about that real possibility. It is a challenging role. It is a tough role to take upon yourself, to be able to discover something new, to innovate, and to launch your own business and to go through the hardship and the sacrifices. But the rewards are endless. And of course, you pave the way for blessing the lives of others and being engaged in that process of transforming, of diversifying economy. In closing, I want to thank our acting president and provost, Dr. Ali, and the UTT team for putting this together, and Dr. Selwyn Ryan, of course, for being our host here this morning. And bear in mind that we live in difficult times, and this is really a serious call for all of us to think seriously about where we are going as a nation, as a country, as a society, as we are still celebrating 50 years of independence. And to think about, if we continue going how we are going, where will we be economically, socially, that we really need to step up to the plate and take greater responsibility for the future of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I believe we have a little time for a few questions. Am I correct? And what I would ask you to do is to ask your questions, be extremely brief. There are some instructions that are inscribed up there, which we are asking you to follow. So if you have a question, just indicate, and I will do what I can to make sure that your presentation is brief and succinct. Straight up, I'm not seeing. Yes, I can see you. Could you, is there a mic somewhere?
I think I have a big enough voice.
I wouldn't comment. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay.
That can affect students' GPA and hence grades. What are we doing and how are we helping our students who have encountered prime situations with respect to the gate funding?
I gather that our questions really come out of that basket that is. It's there as well. So we'll take a few questions and comments before we invite the panel to comment. Could you Thank you. And the winner is, and it comes from Mervyn Extavour, Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago, and his question: UTT being the guiding light for entrepreneurial education and training, as well as the rock upon which such training and development rests, can we be assured that this budget can be the pivot for turning the tertiary education and skills training sector to become lifelong partners in the productive industries, both private and public. Mouthful, but I think it's one that deserves to be treated.